I told you I'd tell you what I decided. It wasn't dramatic. I want to say that up front because I know how these things sound when you tell them after the fact. Like there was a moment of resolve, a turning point, something you could put a soundtrack under. There wasn't. I want to tell you what went through my head in those 4 minutes, because I think the 4 minutes matter more than whatever I ended up deciding. The first thing I thought was, keep driving. Treat the other vehicle the way you treat anything stopped and strange on a road that doesn't belong to you to investigate. I had 60 hours of evidence telling me survival meant motion, and motion meant not stopping for anything I didn't already understand. A vehicle facing me on the wrong side of the median stopped with something I didn't understand. The second thing I thought was, it's a vehicle. Whatever else this turns out to be, somebody started that engine and somebody turned that wheel to cross the median without flipping it. Whatever was happening to the people gone still in diners and gas stations across 3 states, it hadn't taken whoever was driving that thing. Not yet. Not in a way that stops a person from slowing down, crossing, stopping to face me. Not in a way that leaves a working mind behind it. The third thing I thought, and the one that finally settled it, was simpler than either of the first two. I've been alone for 60 hours. I didn't know yet what that does to a person. Not fully, not the way I understand it now. But some part of me, underneath the arithmetic, had reached a place where staying alone cost more than finding out what the headlights were. I sat there for 4 minutes because 4 minutes was the number I'd been giving everything since Wells, and at the end of the 4 minutes I put the truck in gear and rolled forward at maybe 5 miles an hour, hazard still going, and I watched the other vehicle to see what it would do. It rolled forward too, same speed, same caution. We met in the middle of 200 yards like that, both of us doing maybe 5 miles an hour, both of us ready to reverse the decision if the other vehicle gave us a reason to. Neither of us did. We stopped about 30 feet apart. I could see it was a truck now. A dry van, different carrier markings than mine. Paint faded in a way that told me it had been on the road a long time before any of this started. I put my truck in park. I sat there for another minute, engine running, watching the cab. The door opened on the other truck. A woman got out, mid-40s maybe, dark hair pulled back in a ponytail that had stopped being about anything except keeping the hair out of her eyes. You could tell by looking at it that nobody had checked a mirror in days. She had a tire iron in her right hand, held low, not raised, but held the way you hold something you've already decided you'll use if you need to. I got out too. I had a fire extinguisher, the heavy steel kind, not the plastic ones, the kind that could do real damage if you swung it right. I'd grabbed it off the wall mount somewhere in the first hour without really deciding to, the way you grab things that might become useful later. I'd never needed it for anything until now. We stood there, 30 feet then 20, neither of us closing the rest of the distance all at once. The sun was coming up properly now, gray-pink turning gold over the flat land, and I could see her face clearly for the first time. Tired in the same way I knew I looked tired. Her eyes moved over me too fast, the way mine had probably been moving over her, checking, sorting, looking for the wrong kind of stillness, the wrong stiffness in how a body holds itself. "You're moving," she said, not a question. "You too," I said. 60 hours, she said. "Around that. I stopped counting exact." She nodded slowly, like that answer mattered, like she was running it against something in her head. "How long for you?" I said. 4 days, she said. I quit counting forward and started counting backward instead. Don't ask me why. It made sense at hour 20 and it's kept making sense since. We were maybe 15 feet apart now, Neither of us had lowered anything. "You got a handle?" she said. I didn't understand at first. Then I did. CB handle, call sign, the name truckers use on the radio instead of their own. I'd never had one. "No," I said, "never bothered with one. I'm Hector." "Carmen," she said. She didn't lower the tire iron. I understand now why she kept testing. I didn't understand it then, not fully, not until later that day. At the time, I just thought she was being careful the way anyone would be careful. Two strangers meeting on an empty highway after whatever this was. But there was something underneath the carefulness that ran on its own logic. I could see it in the way her questions came. Fast. Almost rhythmic. Like she'd built a sequence years ago for some other purpose, and was running it now because it was the only sequence she had. "What's your rig?" she said. I told her, make, model, the company I drove for, details that would mean nothing to anyone who hadn't spent years inside that world and would mean everything to anyone who had. "Lumper fees," she said. "You ever fight one?" "Every load that goes through a warehouse with a third-party unloading crew," I said. "Wasted 40 minutes once outside Fontana arguing $200 I never got back." "Logbook," she said. "Paper or electronic?" "Die," I said. "Company switched 5 years back. I still keep a paper backup in the glove box out of habit. Never needed it, kept it anyway." She was quiet for a second. Something in her shoulders changed. Not dramatic, just a half-inch of give. A release you only catch if you were already watching for it. "What's it feel like?" she said. "Coming down the west side of the Wasatch loaded. August. Crosswind." I didn't think about the answer. That's the thing about it. I didn't construct anything. I just said what it actually felt like. The way you'd answer if someone asked what your own hands look like. "Like the trailer's trying to have an opinion about where you're going," I said. "You feel it in the wheel before you feel it anywhere else. You back off the throttle on the curves you know are coming, and you hold the wheel a little tighter than you need to on the ones you don't, because the wind comes through that one gap by the ski resort exit, and you never know exactly when." She lowered the tire iron. I lowered the extinguisher. "Okay," she said. "Okay." She put the tire iron back through a loop on her belt. I hadn't noticed until then. Worn, like it had held that exact tool through a lot of ordinary mornings that had nothing to do with any of this. My hands were shaking slightly when I lowered the extinguisher. Not from the danger itself, the shake that comes after, once a body's allowed to stop being ready. "You good?" she said, looking at my hands. "Yeah," I said, "just catching up." "Mine did that too," she said. "First day, stopped after a while." I didn't ask if that was supposed to be reassuring. I think she knew it wasn't, entirely, and said it anyway, because it was true, and true was the only currency either of us had left to offer. I asked her later, much later, days later, somewhere in Iowa, why that question and not an easier one. Why the wind through the gap by the ski resort exit and not something a person could look up. She said it was never really about the facts. Anybody could memorize facts. Anybody could spend an hour on a trucking forum and come back armed with logbook formats and a story about lumper fees. What she'd actually been listening for was whether the answer came out the way a lived thing comes out unconsidered, a little ragged, carrying details that don't serve any purpose except being true. A performance gives you the parts that matter. A person gives you the parts that matter. A person gives you the parts that don't. I think about that a lot now. I think it's the most honest thing anyone said to me in the 4 days I knew her. We didn't get in one truck. I want to be clear about that because I think people hear we found each other and assume something happened faster than it did. We talked for 20 minutes standing on the shoulder of I-80 in the gray morning light, and at the end of it we agreed to travel together. Same direction, same speed, trucks and convoy, her CB and my CB on the same channel, so we could talk without stopping. She told me some of what she knew, not all of it. I could tell she was holding something back the way you hold back a card. You're not ready to play, and I didn't push, because I knew the shape of that holding from the inside. What she told me, she'd had a contact on the CB, a man named Reyes. No relation, she said, just a coincidence of names. They'd worked together for years, and the joke had worn thin a long time ago. Who ran cargo out of a facility in Nevada she'd hauled for on and off for a decade. He'd gotten on the radio in the first hour before most of the alerts and told her 3 things: get moving, don't stop anywhere with walls, and a string of coordinates she'd written on the back of a fueler seat because she hadn't had anything else to write on. She didn't tell me what the coordinates were. She told me she'd be heading there eventually once she had enough fuel and enough certainty about the roads, and she didn't explain why, and I didn't ask, because there was something in how she said it, flat, controlled, the flatness of someone keeping a lid on something with both hands, that told me this wasn't a story I'd get on day one. You hauled for him a long time, I said, not a question the way she'd done it to me. Long enough, she said. Long enough I should have asked more questions than I did. She didn't say which questions, or about what. I let it sit. I told her some things too. Not everything. I told her about Reno, about the window, about the load of medical equipment still riding in my trailer because there was nowhere left to deliver it. I told her about my mother, about the voicemail in Spanish, about not knowing if it had reached her or if there was anyone left at that house to hear a phone ring. I didn't tell her about Greer. I didn't tell her about the 22 minutes on the phone, about being right, about what being right had cost everyone who wasn't me. That one stayed mine for a while longer. We drove. This is the emergency alert system. This message is automated. No live personnel are currently monitoring this frequency. Biological event status, ongoing. Citizens should continue to follow previously issued guidance. This message will repeat. That one came through on day 4 somewhere in Iowa, and it told me something the earlier ones hadn't. There was nobody left choosing the words anymore. The system was running on its own momentum, repeating whatever had last been recorded into it, and nobody was updating it because there was nobody left at the desk to update it from. Carmen heard it on her CB the same time I heard it on mine. Neither of us said anything for a while. No live personnel, she said eventually, her voice coming through my radio flat and a little tinny. That's a hell of a thing to put in an automated message. Somebody programmed that line in, I said. At some point, before all this, somebody sat down and wrote the words for what happens if there's nobody left to read them. Cheerful guy, she said. It was the first thing close to a joke either of us had made in days. I laughed and it surprised me. An actual laugh, short and real, the first one since Sacramento. Carmen didn't laugh back, but I heard something shift in her breathing over the radio, something that might have been the start of one. Late that same day, we picked up a voice on a frequency neither of us recognized. Not CB, not the EAS loop, something in between, weak and breaking up. Spanish. A man, older by the sound of him, talking fast, the fast that comes from fear rather than excitement, words running together at the edges because he didn't trust himself to slow down and still get through it. Carmen caught maybe one word in 5. She came on my channel asking if I had it too, if I could make out what he was saying. I could, most of it. He was somewhere south, Texas maybe, or close to it, the signal too degraded to be sure. And he was saying that the ones who went still didn't all stay still. That some of them got up again after enough time had passed, and that when they got up they didn't know anyone, didn't know themselves, just walked. He said it 3 times in slightly different words, the way you repeat something when you're not sure anyone's listening, and you need to say it enough times that it becomes true by repetition if nothing else. I translated for Carmen over the CB, as close to word for word as I could get it. Not because I needed to soften anything, the man's Spanish was as plain as anything I'd have said in English, but because some of what mattered was in how he said it, not just what, and I wanted her to have all of it. "We should have known," she said after I'd finished. "I mean, we basically already knew, we just hadn't seen it yet." "Yeah," I said. The signal cut out a few minutes later, mid-sentence, the way every other voice had cut out since July 14th. I scanned for that frequency for the rest of the drive and never found it again. I don't know who he was. I don't know if he made it. I think about him sometimes. A voice I actually heard, actually understood, gone the same way everyone else went, except this one I have a memory of his exact words for, which is somehow worse than the ones I only saw. So when we found the man at the truck stop 2 days later, neither of us was as surprised as we should have been. We already knew, in the distant, abstract way you know, something a stranger told you over a broken radio. We just hadn't had to look at it yet. We drove through Iowa together for 2 more days. I'm not going to walk you through all of it. Most of it was just driving, the 2 trucks holding 50 yards apart, talking on the radio when we wanted to, and not talking when we didn't. I learned things about her in pieces. The way you learn things about a person when conversation is the only entertainment either of you has left, and neither of you wants to spend it on anything that doesn't matter. She had a sister in Tucson she hadn't been able to reach. She'd been driving 18 years, longer than me, and had the worn-thin impatience of someone who'd trained a dozen newer drivers and watched most of them quit inside 2 years, someone who'd stopped explaining herself to anyone who hadn't earned the explanation yet. She didn't have kids and didn't regret it, and had gotten tired long before any of this, of people assuming she did, assuming there was a hole in her life shaped like something she'd never wanted in the first place. She kept the photograph of a dog taped to her dash. The dog had died 6 years ago. She said she kept the photo up not because she was still grieving it, but because it reminded her of a version of her own life that looked, in hindsight, uncomplicated. Before the contracts that didn't ask questions, before whatever was sitting under the surface of the word long enough every time she said it. She told me that same drive that she'd grown up in a family where her father drove too, and his father before him, and that she'd spent most of her 20s trying not to become exactly what she became anyway. I asked her if she regretted it. She said no, not the driving, just some of what the driving had let her avoid looking at directly for longer than she should have. I told her about sending money home every month for 11 years, a wire transfer on the 15th, regular as a heartbeat, until the 15th of this month came and went, and there was nowhere to send it to anymore, or no way to know if there was. I told her about my father, who died when I was 26, and the one thing he'd ever told me about official voices that I'd carried for 22 years without questioning it: when official things are being said, you stop what you're doing and you listen. I told her I'd started to wonder, somewhere around day 3, whether that advice had ever actually been good advice, or whether it had just been advice from a man who trusted institutions more than the institutions had ever deserved. She had her own version of the 4-minute rule by then, except hers was 3 minutes, not 4. She said she didn't trust round numbers and liked having a reason to disagree with mine, and I think that was mostly true and partly something else. Partly her keeping one small thing separate, one rule that belonged only to her, in a world that had taken almost everything else that used to be separately hers. We were good at this. I want to say that plainly. 2 days in, we were good at moving together, at trusting the convoy, at reading each other's CB silences for what they meant without needing to ask. It felt, for the first time since July 14th, like something that wasn't just survival. It felt like company. It felt, for stretches of an hour or two at a time, almost like a version of ordinary. On the third night, we stopped together at a rest area outside Des Moines. Empty, lit, a place we'd learned to trust because it had nothing in it shaped like a structure. People would have been inside when the first alert hit. No restaurant, no convenience store, just picnic tables and a vending machine and a long stretch of grass running down to a tree line. We sat on top of one of the tables instead of the bench, the way you do when you want to see further than a bench lets you see. Carmen had a bottle of something she'd taken off a shelf at a stop the day before, not much left in it, and she drank it slow, the way you drink something you're rationing rather than something you're enjoying. "You want to know what I think about mostly," she said. It wasn't a question, the way most things she said weren't questions even when they had question marks on them in my head. "Sure," I said. "I think about the coordinates," she said. "Every day, multiple times a day. I think about them so much I've started to resent thinking about them, if that makes sense. Like I'm being pulled toward a destination I haven't even let myself look at yet." "You don't have to tell me," I said. "I know I don't," she said. "That's not the part I'm stuck on." She was quiet for a while. I didn't fill it. I'd learned by then that filling Carmen's silences was a way of telling her you didn't trust her to come back out of them on her own, and she didn't like that, and I didn't blame her. "There was a load," she said finally, "years back, before any of this. Off the books, no manifest, cash on delivery, a run you take twice a year for a guy you trust because trusting him has been profitable for a decade, and you've stopped asking yourself why a guy who needs an arrangement like that exists in the first place." "Reyes," I said. "Reyes," she said. "I ran one load for him to the coordinates I've got written on a fuel receipt. One load. The weight didn't match the manifest. Not that there was much of a manifest to begin with, but I do this for a living. I know what a load weighs before I know what's in it, and this one was wrong. Lighter than it should have been for the volume, and there was a smell. Not a bad smell exactly, just a smell that didn't belong to anything I could put a name to." "What'd you do?" I said. "Nothing," she said. "I delivered it. I told myself it wasn't my business what was in a sealed trailer I was being paid well to not ask questions about. I told myself that for years, actually. It got easier the longer I went without anything bad happening because of it." "And now he's telling you to come back," I said. "Now he's telling me to come back," she said. "And I don't know if I'm driving toward an answer or driving back into the same thing I already chose not to look at once. I think it might be both. I think that might be the whole problem with it." She didn't say anything else that night about the coordinates, and I didn't ask. But I understood something then that I hadn't understood the first day we'd stood 30 feet apart with weapons half raised. Carmen wasn't running from anything the way I was. I was moving because moving was survival, an animal fact about staying alive, plain as that. Carmen was moving towards something. She'd been moving toward it the whole time, since before I ever crested that rise and saw her headlights. And everything else. The convoy, the shared channel, even the 2 days of company that had started to feel like more than survival, was going to end. Eventually. At a set of coordinates she hadn't told me yet, and a question she'd spent years deciding not to ask. I didn't say any of that out loud. I just sat with her on top of the picnic table until the bottle was empty, and then we both went back to our trucks and slept the way you sleep now. Light, half-dressed, ready to be awake in under a second if something outside the cab gave you reason to be. That's not nothing. I want you to understand that before I tell you what happened next, because I think what happened next is easier to carry if you understand what we had right before it. We needed fuel on the 5th day. We'd been running the tanks down further than either of us liked, holding out for a station that looked right, lights on, pumps that read as functional from a distance, nothing that pinged either of our instincts as wrong. We found one outside a town in eastern Nebraska. I won't name, because I don't think the name matters, and because some part of me still doesn't want to look it up and confirm it's a real place with a real population number attached to it, a number that would now mean something different than it used to. It was a truck stop, bigger than most of what we'd passed, a main building with a restaurant attached, a separate fuel island for trucks, a convenience store section with the lights still on inside, fluorescent and steady. A place built for exactly the people we used to be before any of this started. People with somewhere to be and a schedule that mattered and a need for coffee that tasted like it had been sitting on a burner for 3 hours, because that need used to be ordinary and unremarkable. The way most of what got built along this highway was ordinary and unremarkable until the ordinary stopped applying. We approached slow. Both of us had learned this by now. Slow approach. Watch the windows. Watch for the wrong kind of stillness. Watch for anything moving inside that shouldn't be. Nothing moved. We pulled up to the fuel island. Pumps were running, generator power somewhere keeping the system alive, same as a dozen other stops we'd used. We got out. Carmen took the pump on her side, I took mine, and we both kept half an eye on the main building while the tanks filled. The way you do everything now, never fully looking away from anything. The restaurant section had its lights on. Through the glass, I could see booths, a counter, a layout almost identical to 100 other places I'd driven past in the last 5 days. I didn't see anyone at first. I want to be honest about that. There was a stretch, 10 or 15 seconds, where I looked through that glass and saw nothing, and felt something close to relief. An empty building meant an empty building. It meant nobody to worry about. Nobody still inside doing whatever stillness does to a person. Nobody we'd have to make a decision about. Then the door at the side of the building opened. A man came out. He was maybe 60. Polo shirt with the truck stop's logo stitched on it. Staff, an employee, someone who'd been working the counter or the register when whatever this was started. He came through the door at a normal walking pace, the unhurried pace of someone crossing a parking lot on any ordinary afternoon, and for one full second, less than a second really, the length of a breath, I felt the same relief I'd felt looking through the glass. Another survivor. I almost said it out loud. I think Carmen almost did too. I saw her hand come off the tire iron she'd kept within reach this whole stop. Saw her start to straighten up, start to call out a greeting. Neither of us finished the motion. I want to tell you exactly what was wrong because I've gone over it so many times since that I think I can finally put it in the right order even though, in the moment, it didn't come to me in order. It came all at once, the way wrongness does sometimes, not as a list, as a single feeling that only breaks down into parts afterward when you have time to look at it. The first thing I understood, before I understood anything else about it, was an absence. Something missing from how the scene should have felt, that I couldn't yet name, the way you walk into a room and know before your eyes have caught up to the furniture that something has been moved. Then the parts came. He wasn't going anywhere. That's the part that's hardest to explain, because he was moving. His legs were moving. His arms had the loose, natural swing of a person out for a walk, but the walking wasn't going anywhere. He came out the door, crossed maybe 10 feet of pavement at a steady pace, and then turned, not toward us, not toward the pumps, not toward anything I could identify as a destination, and walked back toward the building at the same steady pace. Then turned again before he reached it, then crossed the same 10 feet again. A loop, not urgent, not panicked. Just a loop, walked at the unhurried pace of someone running a small daily errand, except the errand went nowhere and never finished and didn't seem to need to. The second thing was his face. I want to be careful here because I don't want to make this sound like something it wasn't. His face hadn't changed, not the way you'd expect, not wrong in any visible way you could point to. It was an ordinary, tired, 60-year-old face. But there was nothing happening behind it. I don't mean that as a poetic way of saying he looked sad, or blank, or far away. I mean his eyes moved with his head, tracking whatever was directly in front of him in a general way, but they didn't catch on anything. They passed over the pumps, over Carmen's truck, over Carmen herself standing 20 feet from him with a tire iron half raised, and they didn't catch. The way your eyes catch on a person, actually catch, hold for a half second longer than they hold on a fence post or a parked car, because some part of the brain has clocked that this is a thing that matters more. His didn't do that. Not once. Not on either of us. Carmen called out to him. I remember that, her voice, careful, testing, hey, you okay? He didn't answer. He didn't turn toward the sound. He completed his loop, walked back to within a few feet of the door, turned, started across the same 10 feet again. I called out too, louder, closer to a shout. Nothing. Not a flinch, not a change in pace, not the smallest adjustment that would have told either of us he'd heard a sound at all, let alone understood it as coming from something that wanted a response. Hector. Carmen's voice low now, different. Get the pump. I looked down. My tank was full, had been full for a minute, maybe two, the nozzle just running excess onto the concrete while I stood there watching a man walk a loop that went nowhere. I pulled the nozzle, hung it, screwed the cap on with hands that weren't entirely steady. The man kept walking his loop. Out the door, 10 feet, turn, 10 feet back, turn at the door without going through it, out again. I thought about the 4-minute rule. I thought about every stop I'd timed since Wells, every diner and gas station and rest area where I'd seen people held still and assumed, built an entire survival framework around the assumption that stillness was the only failure. That moving meant something, that if it moved, it was still in there, still a person, still someone whose body was answering to them and nobody else. I watched a man walk a loop that didn't go anywhere and understood, all at once and too late to feel good about understanding it, that I'd been wrong about half of it, maybe more than half. Moving didn't mean someone was driving. It just meant the rule about moving had been learned. Learned and applied the way you'd apply any other rule by whatever was running the body now. Get up, move your legs, don't be still. Nobody had said anything about where to or why or what counted as arriving. Carmen took a step toward him. I saw her do it before I understood what she was doing. One step, tire iron still in her hand but lowered now, like some instinct older than 5 days of survival rules, was telling her this was still a person who might need help, might still be reachable if someone just got close enough and said the right thing. Carmen, I said. I just want to see, she said. I just want to get close enough to see if there's anything. Carmen. She stopped, maybe 8 feet from him now, well inside the distance neither of us had let ourselves get to anything moving and unexplained since Wells. The man kept walking his loop, indifferent to her, indifferent to the 8 feet, indifferent in a way that had nothing to do with rudeness or distraction, and everything to do with the plain fact that whatever was running him didn't sort her into any category that called for a response. Not a threat, not a person, just another shape in the lot, same as the pumps, same as the parked cars. I watched her watch him for 3 or 4 seconds, close enough now that I could see her studying his eyes the way she'd studied mine on the highway, looking, I think, for the same thing she'd been testing for in me. Some flicker, some proof of somebody still home behind the looking. I didn't see her find it. I don't think she did either. She stepped back, came back to the pumps without saying anything, and I didn't ask what she'd seen up close that she hadn't been able to see from 20 feet, because I could tell by her face that whatever it was, she didn't want to be the one who had to put words to it first. We got back in our trucks without discussing it. There wasn't a discussion to have. Both of us understood, in the same 5 or 6 seconds, that whatever was happening to that man wasn't something either of us could do anything about, and that staying to watch any longer than we already had would cost us something neither of us wanted to spend. I pulled out first. Carmen followed 30 seconds behind. We didn't talk on the CB for almost an hour. I drove and watched the road and felt the new shape of what I knew settling into place behind everything else I'd learned in the last 5 days. The columns in my notebook, moving and not moving, had felt for 4 days like a complete picture. A clean division. 2 categories. And you could tell which side of the line anyone fell on just by watching whether they held still. It wasn't clean. It had never been clean. There was a third thing I hadn't had a name for, hadn't even known to look for, and now that I'd seen it once I couldn't stop seeing the outline of it. Everywhere I looked back across the last 5 days. Every stopped vehicle with the engine still running. Every open door I hadn't looked at closely enough. Every distant figure on a horizon that I'd counted as a survivor and kept driving past without slowing down to check. Carmen came back on the radio a little before noon. He used to work there, she said. No preamble. Before. I mean, that's what the shirt says. He worked there. Yeah, I said. You think he's still? She stopped. Started again. I don't know what I'm asking. I don't either, I said. I don't think there's a version of that question with an answer either of us has. We talked it through that evening, parked on the shoulder with both engines off, working out loud through what it meant for how we moved from here. No more buildings, Carmen said, not even to look. We still need fuel, I said. We still need food eventually. We can't just stop touching the world. Pumps only, she said. Exterior only. Anything with a door we have to open, we skip it, even if it looks dead from outside. And if we see another one, I said, moving like that, what do we do? She didn't answer right away. I didn't push her. I think we both already knew the answer, and neither of us wanted to be the one who said it first, because saying it first meant admitting we'd already decided to leave someone, or whatever was left wearing someone, exactly where we found them, without trying anything else. We keep driving, she said finally. That's the only rule that's kept working so far. I told her I thought she was right. I didn't tell her how much I hated agreeing with it. It's a simple rule. I want you to understand how simple it is, because the simplicity is what makes it bearable and unbearable in the same breath. You see someone moving wrong, you don't stop, you don't try to fix it. You keep your foot on the pedal and let the distance between you and them do the only mercy either of you is going to get. I've been living by some version of that rule since July 14th without ever having to say it out loud to another person. Saying it out loud to Carmen made it real in a way it hadn't been before. Not because I hadn't believed it, but because believing something alone and agreeing to it with someone else turn out to be different sizes of the same fact. She was quiet for a while. Then, I want to tell you something. About the coordinates. About where I'm going. Okay, I said. Not yet, she said. Not today. I need a day where I'm not also carrying what we just saw. You understand? I did. I told her I did. We drove the rest of that day, mostly in silence, 50 yards apart, 2 trucks moving east through Iowa under a sky that had stayed exactly the color it was supposed to be the entire time, indifferent to everything happening underneath it. That night we pulled off together onto a county road outside a town neither of us had heard of before that week, parked nose to tail with the engines off for the first time in 5 days, and sat on the running board of my truck, eating crackers from a box she'd taken off a shelf at the truck stop before we left, taken without asking anyone, because there was nobody left to ask, a fact that still caught both of us sideways sometimes, in small ordinary moments like this one. You ever think about what we're going to tell people, she said. After. If there's an after. I don't know if I think there's an after, I said. Not the kind where you tell people things. I think there's an after, she said. I don't know what it looks like, but I think somebody's going to want to know what we saw. Somewhere down the line. Some agency, some committee, some kid doing a project 40 years from now. I think somebody's going to want the order of it. The order of it, I said. Yeah, she said. Not the feelings. Nobody's going to care about the feelings. They're going to want what happened and when and in what sequence, because that's the only part that's useful to anybody who wasn't here. I thought about the recorder, sitting in the cab 6 feet away. Batteries half charged, 300 miles of alerts already saved on a phone with no signal. I didn't tell her about it, not that night. I think I was still deciding, even then, whether the recorder was something I was doing for some eventual somebody else, or whether it was something I was doing because saying things out loud was the only way I had left of proving to myself that I was still a person things happened to, rather than a body that things were simply continuing to do. I still don't fully know the answer to that. I'm not sure it matters which one it turns out to be. This is where tonight runs out. I know that's not how I usually end these. I know you're used to me getting somewhere before I put the recorder down, a fact landed on, a column updated, some shape to the silence at the end. I don't have that tonight. I've told you what happened at the gas station outside that town in Nebraska I won't name, and I've told you that Carmen and I kept driving after, and that's true, and there's more to tell, and I'll tell it. It's late where I am. The county road I'm parked on doesn't have traffic anymore, hasn't for years, but I still find myself listening for it sometimes out of a habit I can't fully account for. Some old expectation that headlights might come over the rise, the way Carmen's did, that the world might still occasionally produce another person moving through it on purpose. It doesn't mostly, I know that. I keep listening anyway. I want to say one thing plainly, because I think I owe you that much, the same way I owe myself the truth in whatever record this turns out to be. I don't talk about Carmen much. You may have noticed that, if you listen to enough of these. I talk about the alerts, the columns, the arithmetic, the 4 minutes, the things that are easier to hold because they're just facts. They don't ask anything of me except accuracy. Carmen is different. Carmen is a name I have to be careful with, the way you're careful carrying something you already know you're going to drop. I'm not ready to tell you why yet. I'll tell you about the coordinates. I'll tell you what she finally said 2 days after the gas station when she was ready to carry it and tell it both at once. I'll tell you all of it in order, the way I tell everything. Just not tonight.